How do you deal with an existential crisis over work? You buy yourself books. Hi, my name is Heather. Welcome back to my channel, and it's been a really hard couple of weeks, I would say. But I am pulling myself together for this video because talking about books with you all is something that always makes me feel that little bit better. I have accumulated some books, and this will probably be my last book haul that is not gift related. We are heading into the gift season. My birthday is coming up as well as Christmas. So this is the last bunch of books that I plan on buying myself. I realize I've said that before, but there is actual logic this time, and I think that will help me stick to it. Several things played into the books that accumulated earlier in the fall. There were a couple that I just could not resist buying. One you have already seen, and that is Madly Deeply, The Diaries of Alan Rickman, because this is on my TBR this month, which has already come out, so I'm not going to say much more about it. Just go watch my TBR to hear further thoughts. I also could not resist buying the next Pages & Co. book by Anna Janes, which is called The Treehouse Library. This sounds wonderful for two reasons. Number one, I have loved her other books. They start with an original trilogy just about Tilly. And then they picked up again with book 4, and we will get 2 other books about a secondary character who shows up in Tilly's stories, who is now at the forefront. And Tilly does still show up in these books, but it is much more about this other character instead. In addition, the Treehouse Library reminds me very much of the Magic Treehouse series, which I remember reading in elementary school. So I wonder if they are linked somehow. But I am so thrilled to have it. I'm saving it for December because these are just perfect, cozy things to read around Christmas time for me. And the last couple of books that I just had to buy full price were a set of 4 books put out by, I believe they're called the Country House Library, which partially sponsors Charlie of The Book Boy on Instagram. And he had a discount code in his bio, and I could not resist buying this 4-pack of books. This is a 4-pack of nonfiction Jane Austen related books, which I think were all curated by the Bodleian Library, or at least most of them were. The first in the set was Martha Lloyd's household book, and it's the original manuscript. Martha Lloyd was one of Jane Austen's dear, dear friends. I think she lived with them for a while, and this is her kitchen and household manual. And it sounds amazing. I haven't even opened it yet. Oh my gosh, it really is a facsimile of the entire household book. Please tell me they've written them out somewhere. Yes, and then we have the actual recipes at the back as well that you can actually read. So this will be fantastic, and I will be saving most of these for Jane Austen July. The next is this beautiful edition of The Chawton Letters, which is edited by Catherine Sutherland, who is a major Jane Austen scholar. And I think this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a collection of letters written either when Austen was living at Chawton or that the Chawton House Museum now has. And they've been bound up for us to read. The next is a book of illustrated quotations from Jane Austen, which again is very much what it sounds like. We have one of her delightful quotes with a lovely period illustration on the other side to go with it. And then finally there's Jane Austen, Writer in the World, also edited by Catherine Sutherland. And this is just a collection of non-fiction essays by a number of Jane Austen scholars, such as some names I recognize are Hilary Davidson, Catherine Sutherland, Freya Johnson, Deirdre Lynch, and a couple of other scholars that I don't know yet. So this will definitely be saved for Jane Austen July because it sounds like the perfect nonfiction read. Then I went to 2 library book sales. One was planned, one was not. The one that was planned I went to with Marissa of Blatantly Bookish, and it's a nearby library to where I live, and I picked up some very interesting books. The first I picked up was The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark, which I've heard about so much, and especially being a teacher, I feel like I should read it just to understand those references. However, given the crisis that I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure that I'm going to get to it right now, because I have some complicated feelings about work right now. So we're going to put that to the side. I also picked up All Together Now by Jill Hornby. This is by the same author who wrote Miss Austen and Godmersham Park. This is one of her earlier works about a choir, I believe, which just sounded wonderful, so I'm so glad to have this. I also picked up this copy of Where Angels Fear to Tread by E.M. Forster. I've been loving reading at least one E.M. Forster per year, so I might work this one in before the end of the year in order to keep that trend going. I know nothing else about the plot, and given that it's so short, I don't know that I want to. I also picked up Gachar Gochar by Vivek Shanbhag, which is, I believe, a contemporary Indian book. And I honestly don't remember anything about the plot, but I remember hearing Ariel Bissett rave about it. So I'm excited to get to this at some point. At Marissa's insistence, I picked up Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward, which is a book that I know she absolutely loves. I have not read anything by Jesmyn Ward, so I'm intrigued to see where this goes. It does sound quite dark, though, because it's written either in the run-up to or in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, I think. So obviously very, very tough, but since Marissa loves it, I am willing to give it a go. I also found Brazen by Penelope Bagiu, which is a lovely young adult graphic novel, kind of multiple biography book about women who bucked societal norms and really paved the way for other radical women going forward. I've heard a lot about it for a number of years, but I've never wanted to pay full price for it. Plus, and I don't know how, I've never realized that it was translated from the French. So I'm really interested to see a non-American or non-English speaking focus on feminist issues. I think that would be really cool. And then I picked up 2 children's books. The first is SEO Trot by Roald Dahl, which I know nothing about, but I do know it was made into a film relatively recently with Judi Dench. And I think it's about 2 older people falling in love facilitated by a tortoise. SEO Trot being tortoise backwards. And then also by Roald Dahl, I picked up a book I have read before, and that is The Vicar of Nibbleswick, which was one of my neighbor's favorite stories when he was very little. And even though I was slightly older when I read it at his insistence, I did quite enjoy it as well. It's about the town of Nibbleswick who gets a new vicar who has back-to-front dyslexia, meaning that when he speaks, some of his words come out backwards. And this lands him into terrible, terrible trouble. And so, despite the silliness, he needs to figure out a way to get his words to come out forwards. And things go on from there. I mean, it's a children's book. I can't tell you anything more. I also picked up 4 musical scores when I was there, which is so incredible because these are usually so expensive to buy full price. First, I got a score of Agrippina by Handel, which is one of my favorite operas, and I have a beginner's guide to Agrippina in my beginner's guide to opera playlist, which I will link down below. So I'm so pleased to have this and to be able now to work through some of my favorite mezzo arias, as you can tell by the tab that I have there. I found another Handel as well. I found Rodelinda, which is one that I've only recently become familiar with, but if it was there, why not take it? I also found this wonderful Bärenreiter edition of La Clemenza di Tito by Mozart, which is one of his slightly more underrated operas, but it really is fantastic and has some wonderful, wonderful mezzo parts for me to work through. And the Bärenreiter's scores are really hard to come by full price. The only place around here, at least, that I can think of to find them is at the Juilliard bookstore, which my friend and I may or may not be planning to visit next month. But nonetheless, I was really pleased to find this at a library book sale. And then finally, this might be my favorite, a hardcover Schirmer edition of La Bohème by Puccini. The classic opera. It's still in such good condition. It is not falling apart at the seams, and I love that it's all marked up. I don't like my books to have notations in them, but I love when music is marked up to try and tell what role this person had with the music. Did they just enjoy it? Were they directing it? Or did they sing a certain role? And what notes did they have to themselves about how to deal with certain passages or the stage directions? I really love seeing that, so I'm so pleased to have all of those. And then the next book sale that I went to was completely spur of the moment. The library down the hill from the school where I work does not advertise their book sales terribly well. The signs usually go up a day or two before they actually happen. So I happened to be able to stop by on my way home from work one day, and I found some really incredible things. The first book I found was Delta Wedding by Eudora Welty. I have been meaning to read Eudora Welty ever since I heard her mentioned on Gilmore Girls in my favorite speech of Rory's, the backpack packing scene. If you're a fan, you may know what I'm talking about. But I didn't really know where to start, so I figured seeing this book at that book sale was a sign that I should start here. Then I also picked up News of the World by Paulette Giles, which I didn't realize was a book. The film always looked really intriguing, so I'm very pleased to try to read the book first. If you saw the trailer for the film, you may have picked up on the fact that Tom Hanks plays an old army captain, an ex-army captain. It is now the 1870s, 1880s, I want to say. And he's living in the American West, and he is charged with taking this girl who was kidnapped from her family and has been living with a tribe of Native Americans for a number of years now, such that she doesn't really remember living among white society, but something has happened, and therefore he is charged with taking her back to her family and back to quote-unquote civilization. And it's about him trying to break down those barriers and trying to befriend her, about crossing the language barrier, the culture barrier, about all the dangers that they come across on this trip in the open West. And I think it's also about how he starts to realize, am I actually doing a good thing by returning her to these people? Does her, even though they're technically her family, do they actually care about her? And that just sounds really fascinating, so I'm very excited to read this. And I also found a copy of Admiral Hornblower in the West Indies by C.S. Forster. I have the first 3 books in the Horatio Hornblower trilogy. I haven't read any of them yet. This, I just discovered, is book 11, so I will not be getting to this for a very long time. But honestly, whenever I see any book in that series now, I just grab it, and hopefully I will be able to fill in the gaps as the years go on. I also found this edition of El Caballero de Olmedo by Lope de Vega, which I believe is a play. Lope de Vega wrote plays. Yes, there he is. Lope de Vega was writing at about the same time that Shakespeare was writing, but in Spain. Honestly, I don't know much about this play. I don't think I've actually read any Lope de Vega. I think when I was in Spain, I was supposed to read Fuente Ovejuna in my Golden Age of Literature class, but we never actually got to it. My professor just kind of summed it up in one sentence for us and said, well, there you go, now you know. But doesn't really give me a great idea of his work. And then I had to watch a film about him for a class when I came back to the States. That was kind of Spain's version of Shakespeare in Love, I think. And I wish I could remember the title because I'd love to rewatch it. But there again, it doesn't give me a very good idea of his actual work. So I will attempt this at some point. It is 16th and 17th century Spanish, so I might put that off for a bit, but I'm very excited to have it as a future possibility, if nothing else. Then I also found An Experiment in Love by Hilary Mantel, which I was excited for because I've never read anything by Hilary Mantel except for her Tudor trilogy. So this is something completely different, and I'd be intrigued to see what her writing style is like here. And I have no idea what it's about. It's just author quotations on the back, so I really don't know. What I loved about picking this up, though, was that when I came home, the first thing my mother said was, "Did you hear? Hilary Mantel just died." So, hello God, giving me a sign to read Hilary Mantel. I then found this very interesting book, and it is The Readers of Broken Wheel Recommend by Katarina Biewald. And this sounds incredibly interesting because I didn't realize until I got it home it was originally written in Swedish, I think, and it's been translated into English. And I'm going to read the back to you, or summarize it to you, because I don't quite remember the details. That's right. So this is about a woman called Sarah who moves to Broken Wheel, Iowa from Sweden just to meet her bookish pen pal. However, when she arrives, she finds out that her pen pal has died. And so now she's in this strange town with no idea what to do with herself. So she decides to open a bookstore. And it's about the various ways that she and the people in the community touch and influence each other's lives. And that just sounds really wonderful. I then picked up 2 more Edith Wharton books to read. The first is The House of Mirth, which is an utter classic. This is one of the big titles that everyone says you should read of Edith Wharton's. I kind of like knowing just that and nothing else about the plot, so I'm going to leave it there. And then the other one I picked up was Summer, which I will probably hold off on reading until the summer. But I'm very excited to have not an underrated, but a less well-known Wharton as well. These last 2 I'm very excited for, especially this one. It's a copy of Charlotte Bronte, A Fiery Heart by Claire Harmon. Claire Harmon is a wonderful literary biographer. She did a wonderful biography of Jane Austen. I believe she did one of Dickens as well in the celebration of his 200th anniversary. And now I have the one that she did about Charlotte Bronte. Now that I have rediscovered my love of the Brontes, I'm especially excited to read this. Possibly next year for Victober, maybe before Victober, maybe whenever I feel like it. I don't know, but I look forward to whenever that is. And then lastly, as a treat to myself for having gotten my latest COVID booster, I picked up Shadow of Night by Deborah Harkness, which is book 2 in the Discovery of Witches series. I really enjoyed book 1 a lot more than I thought I would. And this one takes our main characters to Elizabethan England, which is one of my favorite time periods. So I'm really excited to see how those 2 elements combine, and I hope I love it as much as I think I will. So those are all the books that I've piled up between September and October. Let me know down below if you would recommend that I get to any of these books sooner rather than later, or if you have further questions about any of these books, or if you picked up any really exciting books recently. Like I said, I will probably see you soon with a gifty book haul sometime in the next 2 months. But until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.